The crowd's roar cascaded through the arena like thunder on a summer night. Muhammad Ali, 25 years old and in his absolute prime, danced around the ring with the grace of a ballet performer and the power of a freight train. His opponent, Ernie Terrell, struggled to land even a single meaningful punch as Ali peppered him with lightning-fast jabs. "What's my name?" Ali taunted between punches. "What's my name?" Terrell had deliberately called him Cassius Clay before the fight, refusing to acknowledge Ali's chosen Muslim name. Now, with each devastating combination, Ali demanded recognition, not just of his name, but of his identity, his beliefs, his right to be who he chose to be. It was February 1967 in Houston, Texas. Just 2 months later, Ali would make the most controversial decision of his career, one that would strip him of his heavyweight title, ban him from boxing for 3 years, and turn him from a celebrated champion into one of the most vilified men in America. If this story has already made you feel something, no matter how small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. The morning was unusually quiet in Louisville, Kentucky. In the modest home where he had grown up, Muhammad Ali sat across from his mother, Odessa Clay. Her eyes, filled with worry, never left her son's face as he spoke with unusual softness. "Mama, they want me to go to Vietnam," Ali said, his normally boisterous voice barely above a whisper. "They're drafting me into the army." Odessa reached across the kitchen table and placed her weathered hand over his much larger one. "What are you going to do, son?" Ali had spent sleepless nights wrestling with this question. As a devout Muslim who had converted to Islam and joined the Nation of Islam in 1964, he held sincere religious objections to fighting in the war. More than that, as a black man in 1960s America, he questioned why he should fight for a country where his people still couldn't eat at certain restaurants or stay in certain hotels. "I can't go, Mama," he finally said, his voice finding its strength. "I won't go." The decision came at the height of Ali's boxing career. At 25, he was undefeated with 29 wins. He had shocked the world 3 years earlier by defeating Sonny Liston to become heavyweight champion. He was fast, he was skilled, and he was marketable. The perfect champion. But on April 28, 1967, when Muhammad Ali reported to the Armed Forces Induction Center in Houston, he refused to step forward when his name was called for induction into the United States Army. "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong," he had famously said months earlier. The consequences were swift and severe. Within hours, the New York State Athletic Commission suspended his boxing license and stripped him of his heavyweight title. Other boxing commissions followed suit. The federal government charged him with draft evasion, and on June 20th, 1967, Ali was convicted after a jury deliberated for only 21 minutes. The judge imposed the maximum sentence, 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. As Ali left the courthouse, flashbulbs exploding around him, reporters shouted questions. "Are you a coward, Clay? Do you hate America? Why won't you fight for your country?" Ali paused on the courthouse steps, surrounded by his lawyers. The same voice that had taunted opponents in the ring now spoke with measured dignity. "And I strongly object to the war in Vietnam. And I cannot put on a uniform and go 10,000 miles to help murder and kill poor people simply to continue the domination of white slave masters over the darker people of the earth." His words, bold and unapologetic, would echo through history, but in that moment they only fueled the hatred directed at him. Newspapers across the country condemned him. Fellow boxers criticized him. Even some civil rights leaders, worried about jeopardizing their cause, distanced themselves from his stance. That night, alone in his hotel room, Ali stared at the ceiling. He had sacrificed his title, his income, and his reputation. Though his conviction would eventually be appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, he faced the very real possibility of spending the next 5 years in prison. Sleep eluded him as he contemplated the path ahead, a path that would transform him from merely a boxing champion into something far more significant, a champion of conscience. The years stretched before Muhammad Ali like an endless desert. Banned from boxing during what should have been the prime of his career, from age 25 to nearly 29, he found himself in professional exile. The man who had once commanded millions of dollars per fight now traveled to college campuses, speaking for a few $100s a night. It was 1969, and Ali stood before a packed auditorium at Howard University. Gone was the flashy silk robe, replaced by a simple dark suit. Gone was the boxing ring, replaced by a wooden podium. But his charisma remained, his voice still commanding attention as he spoke about his opposition to the Vietnam War. Why should they ask me to put on a uniform and go 10,000 miles from home and drop bombs and bullets on brown people in Vietnam while so-called Negro people in Louisville are treated like dogs and denied simple human rights? He asked the rapt audience. A young woman in the front row raised her hand. Mr. Ali, do you regret your decision now that you've lost everything? The question hung in the air. Ali looked around the auditorium at the hundreds of faces, mostly young, mostly black, waiting for his answer. I haven't lost everything, he replied. I've lost money, I've lost titles, I've lost some fair-weather friends, but I've found my freedom, my self-respect, and I've found something worth fighting for beyond the ring. The audience erupted in applause. As Ali traveled from campus to campus during these wilderness years, he was finding a new kind of victory. The same courage that had made him fearless in the boxing ring now made him fearless in standing by his convictions, even as they cost him dearly. But the costs were indeed high. In his modest apartment in Chicago, Ali sat at the kitchen table with his second wife to Belinda. Bills were spread before them, and the worry lines on Belinda's face told the story clearly enough. We're behind on the rent again, she said quietly. Ali nodded. Once, he had earned millions. Now, with his boxing income gone and many corporate opportunities closed to him because of his controversial stance, financial stability was a constant struggle. It'll get better, he assured her, though uncertainty clouded his eyes. The case is going to the Supreme Court. They'll see I'm sincere. While Ali waited for the Supreme Court to decide his fate, the public's perception of him was slowly beginning to shift. As casualties mounted in Vietnam and public opinion turned against the war, many Americans began to reevaluate the boxer's stance. The same principles that had made him a pariah in 1967 were gradually earning him respect by 1970. On campus at UCLA, after finishing his speech, Ali was approached by a middle-aged white man in an army uniform. I served 2 tours in Vietnam, the man said, his voice gruff, but not unkind. I didn't agree with you at first, thought you were dodging your duty. Ali waited, his expression neutral. I still don't know if I fully agree with you, the veteran continued, but I respect your willingness to pay the price for what you believe. That takes a different kind of courage than what we needed over there. He extended his hand, and Ali shook it firmly. Such moments were becoming more common as the national mood shifted. On June 28, 1970, the Supreme Court unanimously overturned Ali's conviction. The court ruled narrowly, finding that the Justice Department had failed to properly specify which of Ali's stated beliefs disqualified him from classification as a conscientious objector. While the court didn't fully validate Ali's broader constitutional claims, the practical effect was the same. Muhammad Ali was legally vindicated. The news reached Ali while he was visiting a mosque in Chicago, When a friend burst in with the newspaper announcing the decision, Ali didn't shout or celebrate as he might have after a boxing victory. Instead, he bowed his head in prayer, grateful that his legal ordeal was over, but mindful of the many young men, particularly young black men, who didn't have the resources to fight their draft notices all the way to the Supreme Court. Later that evening, as reporters gathered outside his home, Ali finally addressed the decision. "I've never thought of myself as great," he told them. "I'm just a man who stood up for what he believed in, whatever the cost, and I hope that's what they'll remember about me." But before the world could fully come to terms with Ali, the conscientious objector, it was time for Ali the boxer to return to the ring. After 3.5 years away from professional boxing, Muhammad Ali was about to remind everyone of his original claim to fame. The wilderness years were over, but their impact on Ali and on America would never fade. October 26, 1970, Atlanta Municipal Auditorium hummed with anticipation. After 3.5 years of exile, Muhammad Ali was returning to the boxing ring to face Jerry Quarry, a tough, experienced fighter with a reputation for giving even the best boxers difficulty. In his dressing room, Ali sat quietly as his corner team wrapped his hands. Gone was some of the youthful bravado. At 28, Ali carried himself with a more measured confidence. The years away from boxing had changed him, not just politically and spiritually, but physically. Would his legendary speed still be there? Had his reflexes dulled? These questions hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. "You ready, champ?" asked Angelo Dundee, his longtime trainer, as he finished taping Ali's hands. Ali nodded. "Been ready for 3 years." When Ali emerged from the tunnel, the crowd erupted. Black celebrities and civil rights leaders filled the front rows, a testament to the significance of this moment beyond sports. This wasn't just a boxing match, it was a cultural milestone, a return from political exile. The opening bell rang, and Ali circled Quarry cautiously. The first few exchanges revealed that some of his speed had indeed diminished, but not his skill, not his ring intelligence, and certainly not his heart. By the third round, Ali had found his rhythm, peppering Quarry with jabs that opened a deep cut over his eye. After the third round, the referee stopped the fight due to the severity of Quarry's cut. Ali had won his comeback fight, but the real victory had happened before he even stepped into the ring. He had stood by his principles at enormous personal cost, and now he was reclaiming his career on his own terms. The path back to the heavyweight championship, however, would not be easy. 6 months after defeating Quarry, Ali faced the biggest test of his comeback, a match against Joe Frazier, who had claimed the heavyweight title during Ali's absence. The fight, billed as the fight of the century, took place at Madison Square Garden on March 8, 1971. For 15 brutal rounds, Ali and Frazier battled in one of boxing's greatest contests. Despite Ali's skill and determination, Frazier's relentless pressure and devastating left hook proved decisive. In the 15th round, Frazier caught Ali with a thunderous left hook that sent him crashing to the canvas. Only the third time in his career that Ali had been knocked down. Though Ali rose to finish the fight, Frazier won by unanimous decision. In his dressing room afterward, as a doctor examined his swollen jaw, Ali reflected on the loss, his first as a professional boxer. "Getting that title back just got harder," he said quietly to his corner team. "But that's all right. I've faced harder things than Joe Frazier." Ali's journey back to the championship would indeed take years, filled with spectacular fights against the likes of Ken Norton, who broke Ali's jaw in their first match, and a rematch victory over Frazier. Finally, on October 30th, 1974, Ali got his shot at the heavyweight title against the seemingly invincible George Foreman in Kinshasa, Zaire, the famous Rumble in the Jungle. Against all odds and contrary to conventional boxing wisdom, Ali employed his rope-a-dope strategy, leaning against the ropes and allowing Foreman to punch himself into exhaustion. In the 8th round, with Foreman fatigued, Ali launched a lightning combination that sent the champion crashing to the canvas. At 32 years old, Muhammad Ali had regained the heavyweight championship of the world, completing one of the greatest comebacks in sports history. After the fight, as dawn broke over Kinshasa, Ali sat alone on the balcony of his hotel room. The city was still celebrating his victory, sounds of joy echoing through the streets. A reporter who had been granted rare access found him there, staring contemplatively at the horizon. "Champ, how does it feel to be on top of the world again?" the reporter asked. Ali was quiet for a moment before answering. "You know, when they took my title in '67, I told the press, you can take something that's not yours. The title was mine, and now it's mine again. But this is bigger than boxing now." "What do you mean?" "I stood up for something I believed in," Ali said, "and now I've proved you don't have to compromise your principles to succeed. That's what I want young people to understand." What Ali couldn't know, as he sat on that balcony in Zaire, was that his greatest vindication, beyond the legal victory, beyond reclaiming the heavyweight title, was still decades away. A future presidential apology would complete his journey from reviled draft resister to celebrated American hero. January 9th, 1997. The East Room of the White House glowed with the light of crystal chandeliers. Distinguished guests filed in and took their seats, their excited murmurs filling the historic space. Among them sat sports legends, political figures, civil rights leaders, and members of the press. And there, in a place of honor, sat Muhammad Ali. At 55, his once lightning-fast hands now trembled with Parkinson's disease, a condition many attributed to the punishment he had absorbed during his boxing career. His movements were slow, deliberate, but his eyes remained sharp and alert, taking in the significance of the moment. President Bill Clinton entered the room to applause. After greeting various dignitaries, he made his way to Ali, leaning in close to speak with the former champion. Those nearby couldn't hear their exchange, but they saw Ali's face break into that familiar smile, still magnetic, still full of mischief, despite the physical limitations that now constrained him. The ceremony was ostensibly to honor Ali with the Presidential Citizens Medal, the second highest civilian award in the United States. But everyone present understood that this was more than a routine award ceremony. This was America, coming to terms with its treatment of a man who had stood by his principles 30 years earlier, at tremendous personal cost. President Clinton approached the podium and began to speak. "Today we honor a man who has always stood his ground and never compromised his beliefs," Clinton said. On days when he refused induction into the armed forces, Muhammad Ali made a decision that cost him his title, his livelihood, and nearly his freedom. History has proven that his stance against the Vietnam War was deeply principled and profoundly patriotic. The room fell silent as Clinton continued, his words carrying the weight of official recognition. The United States government was wrong in what it did to Muhammad Ali in 1967, the president said clearly. But on behalf of the American people, I apologize for the treatment he received for following his conscience. A wave of emotion moved through the room. Some of Ali's old friends and supporters, people who had stood by him during those difficult years, wiped away tears. For them, this moment represented a vindication they had awaited for decades. When it was Ali's turn to receive the medal, he rose slowly, his movements deliberate. As President Clinton placed the medal around his neck, photographers captured the moment, a powerful image of reconciliation between a nation and one of its most complicated heroes. Though Ali's voice had been diminished by Parkinson's, He had prepared brief remarks, which he delivered in a soft but determined tone. "I don't look at this as an achievement for myself," he said. "This is for all the young people who stood up for what they believed in during those difficult times. Sometimes standing alone for what's right is the heaviest weight anyone can carry." The ceremony concluded with a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. As guests mingled afterward, Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall's widow approached Ali. "My husband always said you would be vindicated," she told him. "But he said history has a way of siding with those who stand on principle." Ali smiled and squeezed her hand gently. Outside the White House, as Ali's car prepared to depart, a small group of Vietnam veterans had gathered. They weren't protesters. They were there to pay their respects. One man, grey-haired and wearing his service medals, approached Ali's car as the boxer was being helped inside. "We didn't understand back then," the veteran said simply. "But many of us do now. Thank you for having the courage we all needed." Ali reached out slowly and touched the man's shoulder, a gesture of reconciliation that spoke volumes. As the car pulled away, Ali gazed back at the White House. The journey from that courthouse in Houston in 1967 to this presidential apology in 1997 had been long and difficult. He had lost his title at the height of his powers. He had been vilified as a coward and a traitor. He had sacrificed millions of dollars and years of his career, but in the end he had gained something far more valuable, the vindication of history. The young man who had stood alone against the tide of public opinion was now celebrated as a hero of conscience. The country that had once condemned him now honored him with its second highest civilian award. The government that had tried to imprison him had officially apologized. Muhammad Ali's story had become more than a sports legend. It had become an American parable about the cost and ultimate reward of standing by one's principles, no matter the consequences. From heavyweight champion to draft resister, from pariah to hero, Ali's journey mirrored America's own complicated reckoning with the Vietnam War and its treatment of those who opposed it. As night fell over Washington, the medal rested against Ali's chest, a tangible symbol of a nation's apology and a man's vindication. If you made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing. I tell these stories with my heart in my hand to reach people like you who feel, who get emotional, who truly live. If this touched you, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.